It's Thursday, March 8th. I'm your host, Sarah Beal. On today's show, we'll talk to Town Manager Mark Ells and State Representative for the 2nd Barnstable District, Will Crocker. But first, let's get a look at today's top headlines. Due to the recent storms, the extreme conditions, and excessive debris, the off-road vehicle beach at Sandy Neck Beach Park will remain closed until further notice. The gatehouse was flooded from Storm Riley also and is also closed. We will keep you up to date on the status of Sandy Neck Beach Park when we talk with Beach Park Manager Nina Coleman tomorrow on Barnstable Today. A travel advisory has been issued by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers New England regarding the Sagamore Bridge. Beginning Tuesday, March 27th, the Sagamore Bridge will be reduced by 2 lanes as work begins on a 55-day project. The work will be done 24 hours a day. The Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority will hold an informational meeting about the project at 10 a.m. on March 20th at the Hyannis Transportation Center. The public is invited to attend. A notice from the Massachusetts Department of Marine Fisheries, the DMF Shellfish Program is assessing the impacts on water quality and shellfish safety as a result of the nor'easter storm of March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Due to the significant coastal flooding and rainfall associated with the coastal storm that impacted Massachusetts, all Massachusetts shellfish growing areas will continue to remain closed until further notice. DMF is in the process of assessing the impacts of last week's storm and will provide information as it becomes available. For the most up-to-date information on the status of shellfishing, please visit the Town of Barnstable's Facebook page. The Barnstable Youth Commission will again be hosting their Community Prevention Forum and 7th Grade Youth Summit. The Community Prevention Forum will be held on Thursday, March 15th at Cape Cod Community College in the Tilden Arts Center. The public is welcome to attend for a presentation and open discussion with a panel of Barnstable police officers. They will be discussing, demonstrating, and sharing views on how we can work together to keep our community safe. The 7th Grade Youth Summit will take place the next day, also at Cape Cod Community College, with Dynamic Influence and Kevin Rosario, along with BHS Peer Leadership, presenting. There will also be presentations by many clubs, sports, and activities that will be available to the 7th graders entering the high school in the fall. Up next, Town Manager Mark Ells. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. Like always, we have a lot to discuss. The first thing we want to talk about is the capital budget. I spoke earlier this week with Mark Milne about that from his perspective, but let's talk about it from your perspective as the town manager.
Well, it's probably one of the most important things that the manager does for the town. Putting together the budget and bringing forward the budget to the town council for consideration. It's kind of a fundamental part of what you're tasked with and your responsibilities as a manager under the charter, and there's time frames. That's why people will always, wonder why I say that we're adhering to the budget schedule, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's in the charter. And so we have to be compliant with that, and we don't obviously don't want to miss those deadlines. So it's capital budget is extremely important. It's when we're planning for the assets of the community. We've got master plans pretty much in every major area that we're tasked with maintaining these assets, whether it's buildings or roads or sewers or water lines, or now we're developing master plans for fields in our community, and all of the other, we've got beaches and bathhouses and marinas, and we have channels that are utilized in our bays, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've really had a focused effort on developing master plans, having 5-year plans, both from a capital standpoint, and then matching up operating and maintenance costs to those investments that we have to make sure that we are maximizing the use of those assets. And I know I say that over and over and over again when we talk, but it's critical. And the town of Barnstable is one of the biggest in the Commonwealth. We have, the 4th largest roadway system. And people think we are a quaint community, but they think we're little. And I say, no, not at all, not at all. Just try to drive from Katuitt to Barnstable Village.
Yeah, it'll take you about 25 minutes to get there.
And you'll realize how big Barnstable is and how much there is within an airport. which you should do a show on. I'm sure you have,
Yep.
but the capital planning for an airport is significant. And so, yes, we're entering into that. They'll be doing a first reading of the orders at the next meeting for those proposed capital projects for FY19. We'll start a second reading of those in April, and that'll probably continue for 2 or 3 meetings. And then right behind that is going to come the operating budget. We will be in before council this next Thursday evening for the reorganization modifications in the administrative code. And then when the operating budget comes in, the operating budget will follow that structure. So we'll be moving around resources to match up with the organizational structure.
Okay,
So-
and we've talked about the organizational structure quite a bit on this show. Is it the same as it has been since we began talking about it?
Since my last conversation, yeah. You know, there's a lot of, you know, again, we're realigning resources so that we can better utilize them toward the priorities of the community. That's the primary focus. You know, people get hung up in you know, certain words, or if they were in a department and now they're in another, you know, they're concerned about change. And, you know, I think that once they're functioning that way, they'll see that there's no cause for concern. And in fact, hopefully, if what we've planned to do is successful, they'll be more effective. And but you know, you hear that people say, oh well, this is a demotion, or this is more work, or in the end, that's not the intent. It's to align everybody to make them more efficient. But I think if we find that, you know, any of that exists, then there's processes to go through to correct, you know, correct as needed. So, well, we're pretty confident that this is hopefully will be successful through council, reflected in the next budget and approved, and then on July 1st, it'll be a go.
It'll be a go.
Then Mark Milne will be a busy man because he's actually got to restructure everything financially.
Yeah,
So,
that'll be
yeah.
a big project for
Yeah,
him,
the
I'm
first
sure.
quarter of next fiscal year will be very busy for us. Yeah.
The next thing we want to talk about is the chief search. I know
Yes.
this is through a civil service, so it's a little bit different than just, you know, posting a job. There's a survey that's available until Friday on the town website. It's right on the homepage, so if people can go to that and take the survey. I took it. It took about 5 minutes to take. It's you know, I think it's important that people participate in this process. And you've been out and about talking to different community groups. You've been to the senior center, I believe, and the high school. What can you say about where we are so far in the chief search?
Well, we're following the process that the civil service lays out for us, and it initially starts by us selecting a consultant who then is acceptable and becomes responsible to civil service, and they go through a screening process, and from that screening process, and really you have the people that can apply in-house would be, because the chief is not there, the position's vacated, it would be 2 levels below. So in our case, it would be our deputy chiefs and our lieutenants. Any and all are welcome to apply. They've gone through that process. They create assessment centers. They rank the candidates. The top 3 candidates come to me on March 15th. And meaning they give me that list. I don't have an official list of who it is. And so from there, now it becomes the town manager's responsibility to go forward with a review process of those 3 candidates. Now, it doesn't like set you all the way back to the beginning again for those 3.
Right.
Those 3 are in order, and there is an appeal process by any individual. If you don't take the top one and you go to the second one, you've got to justify it, and there's an appeal process on their part back to the state to say, well, wait a minute, I did deserve that job. So there is a lot of authority that is given to the civil service and civil service process in this, you know, as we go through the selection. It's not just, like you said, posting a job
Right.
and putting together an interview group and selecting the person that, you know, in that situation you felt was most appropriate.
Right.
It's a very different process than that. So a lot of the questions that we're getting are related to that.
Okay.
And But I'm still very confident that we have very good people in our police department. So I'm sure the top three will be very good candidates, and we'll have to make a tough decision at that point. Quite honestly.
Chief McDonald has done a really good job of staffing his department. So anyone that applies, I'm sure, would be a great asset as a chief, and be interesting to see how the process moves forward. And can't wait to find out who's going to be.
Planning, as the chief departs in early May, to have a replacement. So
wonderful.
I hope that that's the way it works. But you did ask me, okay, so the survey helps us gather information in general. I'm going out to different groups and asking them if they want to provide input. That would be great. People have been emailing me anyways about it. Calls as recent as yesterday on it, and emails yesterday, and they've been flowing in pretty steady. And then I'll create a group that will interview, and we'll go through this review process. And Bill Cole will be our Human Resources Director, will be a key part of it, because it's so procedure oriented that he's going to have to keep all of that in line so that when we ultimately make a recommendation, it'll be an acceptable one. And then I bring it to Town Council for ratification. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
The last thing we want to talk about is Vineyard Wind. They've been talking about all sorts of substations and coming in off of Colville's Beach. Where are we with this process? I know that it's definitely a lot of information.
Active. We are active. We had a meeting as recent as last Thursday with them, and they are proceeding with this project. And where they are, big picture in it, is that they're trying to be awarded. If you spend time looking, I think you can go onto their website, Vineyard Wind, if you Google that, and and there's 3 different grant areas that were put out to RFP. They were awarded one of those areas, and now they are going through the permitting process at the various governmental levels to be awarded that grant area, because I think they're only going to award one of the 3 grant areas that they had to proceed. So they're in that competition. I think they find out in April whether they or someone else will get it. Now the other areas actually route to the west, so southwest. So they would come in not on Cape Cod.
Okay.
This one basically brings it in between Martha's Vineyard, because they're about more than 10 miles south. I think it's southeast of Martha's Vineyard. I'd have to look at a map to be positive. But so they're going to route in between Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, and they're looking to have landfall either in Yarmouth or Barnstable. And that's still actively being looked at. I think they have in their plan 3 landfalls, 2 in Yarmouth, 1 in Barnstable. Ultimately, though, they end up in Barnstable at a substation. So there's multiple processes, regulatory processes, permitting processes that are ongoing relevant to zoning. They're asking for, the most recent one is they're asking for the Department of Public Utilities for a waiver of the zoning requirements for utilities. And we don't get, that's a decision the state makes, and then if it's waived, our zoning doesn't apply. And that's the process. And they're going to talk, there's a meeting coming up at the high school on the 12th at 5:30 in the evening. And they're going to talk about their project, but they're going to talk about these processes as well. And so that's already in the works. We're wondering if they're going to file for this. There's like a comprehensive permit that they get so that nothing locally applies. It's all done at another level. They haven't filed that yet, to my knowledge. They've come to us last Thursday to inform us of this meeting they're going to hold on the 12th, and to ask us to begin discussions with them, begin discussions about landfall locations in Barnstable, begin discussions about the routing, to begin discussions about, and I don't mean, we've had general discussions, but I mean like sit down, look at maps, figure out where this is really going to happen, discussions. and about the substations. And I don't know where they are with Yarmouth, quite honestly. The other aspect of it is they've asked us to begin a discussion about what a host agreement might look like. We've had a host agreement before. Now, we have cable coming in over on Ocean Street from Nantucket. The main feed comes in there, and I was actually at Public Works when we did that, and they did a landfall and they ran it through the streets, not unlike what's proposed here. And it all worked out well, and we had an agreement, and they not different group, but
Right.
The contractor complied with everything that was in there. So they want to sit down and develop this host agreement, at least the framework for it. So yeah, we're proceeding along all of those fronts. We did identify some big concerns, and if you're familiar with the Cape Wind project, which wasn't beyond Martha's Vineyard, it was on this side, between the Cape and Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, which the town of Barnstable opposed, and at this time that's no longer an active project.
Right.
But the concern is that the cable that comes in, we had two major concerns. The cable that comes in, that if somebody ever brought that project back, they could connect to this cable. And if it's in federal waters, it's unclear whether they could or they couldn't.
Right.
The second concern has to do with, these are major concerns, there's tons of details, but the other major concern is that substations use a fluid in the station that is a major concern if it gets out into the environment. And so we need to be assured that as they upgrade, they're going to build new stations, but they may have to upgrade the other stations that they're connecting into as well, that these, not only at the station itself is it a closed system, which none of them are now. Actually, there's one that the town of Barnstable required NSTAR to do over at the airport when they upgraded the substation. This wasn't this group, this was, NSTAR. But so we want to make sure that there's no potential for groundwater contamination. Now, the true way to do that, because if there's a catastrophic failure of a substation, like it blows up,
Right.
which has happened, and happened on Old Stage Road,
Yeah.
right in town, because people say, well, that never happens. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It happened last year.
Yeah.
So if that happens, then the only way to address this, to prevent it from getting into the environment, is to make sure that our wells aren't down gradient. So we're having that active discussion with them about substations and having in place, adequate protection so that that is not a concern. So those are two major issues.
Yes.
Huge issues that we've said, beyond that, let's start the discussion. But if you can say to us, yes, we will work with you and make sure that we are able to deliver what you're asking, then we can continue discussions. If they can't, then that's going to be a major issue. And we've been very open and clear right from the start. It's what we wrote in our filing with the Mass Environmental Protection Act when they filed their MEPA documents. We said that right in there. So I'm not hiding these issues.
No, not at
we
all.
want to get them right out in front and have the conversations, and then if they can work with us on this, great.
Wonderful.
That'd be great.
So just remind everybody that the meeting with the Vineyard Wind at Barnstable High School is on Monday, March 12th at 5:30 p.m. That's a great place to go to get more information and ask your questions. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My guest today is Mark Ells. He's the town manager here in the town of Barnstable. Coming up next, my monthly chat with State Rep Will Crocker. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for our monthly chat about what's going on up at Beacon Hill. The first thing we're going to talk about is something we've been talking about many times when you've been in the studio, is the home rule. I believe it's 3953.
3953. Finally, we got it through the legislative process, which is arduous at best. 3953 was a home rule petition that went through the council session, started in the Roads Committee, back when I was actually the chairman of the Roads Committee, was passed through the Roads Committee, went to the full council for a vote there, and it was approved there, then went to the budget process. 3953 is kind of an expansion of a bill that we sent up as a home rule petition in 2014 with regard to using public money for the maintenance of private roads. That piece of legislation in 2014 said that that money could only be used for the actual physical construction, whatever you need, the asphalt and the trucks and all of that sort of stuff, to actually physically maintain the road. What House Bill 3593 asked for was to expand that a little bit to say you could also use the money for planning, engineering, and design. So that has gone through the House process, went through the committees, and was passed in the House, passed in the Senate, engrossed in the House, engrossed in the Senate, and last week went to the governor's desk to sign, and last Thursday he signed it into law. So now the town of Barnstable can use the money now for engineering and design for any private road that it decides to maintain.
Wonderful, and that kind of completes that whole, from start to finish. The town can now make sure that that road is, whatever road it is, whatever private road it is, they can do everything from beginning to end using those private funds.
Right.
I mean public funds for private roads.
It doesn't mean that every single private road
Right.
is going to be repaired, but generally it will allow the town to, what it has been doing now for the last 4 years, is to pick up the maintenance on certain roads that are considered connector roads, very important roads, maybe a road that connects one part of the town to another,
Yeah.
or maybe the town to another town, Mashpee-Wakeby Road out in Cotuit-Santuit, that area which connects into Mashpee, and roads that connect into other parts of the town, north to south, east to west. That are considered, very, very important roadways. The town will now be able to use that money from start to finish to be able to engineer any changes they want to make on it and actually do the physical work.
Wonderful. It's a interesting and arduous process, but happy that it was able to go through. Next thing I want to talk about is it's budget season, which is always, everybody's working on their budgets, and you have some budget asks that you put in for this year. What can you tell me about what some of your asks were? Yeah,
so this year was a brand new situation in that we have a new, the House has a brand new Ways and Means Committee chair, Chairman Sanchez, who has taken over from Chairman Dempsey, who left the legislature. So it was a whole new kind of process. None of us had actually ever met with him before, so we weren't really sure exactly how the procedure was going to be. So it was an opportunity for me to get to know Chairman Sanchez a little bit better, and some of the things that I asked for the town, and with regard to some earmarks that we'd like to be able to see get put into the budget. $120,000 for the renovation project at the Kennedy Memorial out there next to Veterans Beach. That, I believe, was constructed back in, 1967, and obviously it's been renovated and kept up, but now there's there's $1 million process going on to do a lot more work on that. It needs it, so the $120,000 is going to go basically for paving, fixing the benches and that sort of stuff, whatever, the wall restoration. So it's part of the $1 million project. That's one of the things that we're going to be looking at. And for the people who come here in the summertime, it's part of the JFK Legacy Trail. So a lot of people go there as part of, as one of the visits along the Legacy Trail. And as we all know, JFK has a huge, impact here in the town of Barnstable.
It's one of the most popular landmarks in town. Anytime when the weather's nice, no matter what the time of year is, there's always people there. So it's important for the town to, spruce that up and keep it in a good state so that all the visitors can enjoy it. So that's wonderful. I'm glad that's in there.
One of the other things was the Cape Cod Rail Trail Phase 4 planning study. We put in for $50,000 for that to look at some possible alternative routes, which have to be done. Doesn't mean that the alternative route will be used, but MassDOT needs to have alternative routes as part of the planning study, just so in case they have to be used. But it's good to have that information in the study, so they ask for alternative routes to be used. So that's the $50,000 will be part of the Cape Cod Rail Trail study, and we also asked for $50,000 for some renovation work, repair work out at Blish Point out in Barnstable, because there's doing some repair work. There's always erosion at beaches, and over time things need to get fixed, and hopefully there will be an earmark for $50,000 to be able to get some of that work done.
Wonderful. It's a busy location in town for sure. Is there anything else you'd like our viewers to be aware of before I let you go today?
Just one of the other things that I probably don't get a chance to say, depending on when these things air, but I always have office hours, always on the first Friday of every month here in Barnstable from noon to 1:30. I have an office up on the 3rd floor next to Lynn Poyant's office, and anybody who wants to talk about issues with regard to the town of Barnstable, with respect to things that I can work on up at Beacon Hill, they're welcome to come in and talk about those issues. It's always the first Friday of every month. Rain, snow, or whatever,
right?
From 12 to 1:30, and anyone who wants to come up, be welcome to sit down and talk with them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. My guest today is Will Crocker. He's the state rep in the 2nd Barnstable District. Now let's take a look at the community calendar. The Hyannis Library, with the support of the Zion Union Heritage Museum, will host the Bright Star Touring Group's performance of Let Freedom Ring, songs, poems, and speeches of Black history. The event will be held on Wednesday, March 15th at 1:30 p.m. at the Hyannis Public Library. The language used by those who fought for freedom and equal rights for all people is uniquely powerful and beautiful. This moving show celebrates those words and brings them to life on the stage. This event is free and open to the public. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of Barnstable Today. On Friday's show, we talked to Recreation Program Coordinator Mickey Davies, Sandy Neck Beach Park Manager Nina Coleman, and Youth Commission Chair Matt Hersey. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Beal.